July 4th, 2005. A massive cruise ship is making a 12-day round-trip tour through the idyllic Mediterranean Sea. For 26-year-old George Smith, it's the perfect honeymoon getaway with his beautiful new bride, Jennifer. The young couple are excited to vacation and party hard with fellow travelers. But in the boozy haze, the Smiths' world will soon be turned upside down, never to be the same. Early on the morning of July 5th, George Smith disappears into the pre-dawn darkness without a trace. What has happened to George? Is it a tragic accident no one could have predicted? Or did someone on board want him dead? And if so, why? June 29, 2005. A cruise ship sets off from Barcelona on a 12-day round trip circling the Mediterranean Sea. One of the highlights of the trip is a stop at the Greek island of Mykonos.
The Greek islands are one of the most beautiful places in the world. They're a perfect place to escape to. You have all the history, but you also have amazing food, warm people, beautiful sun, glistening ocean. It's absolutely paradise.
Many of the 2,300 passengers on board are young people enjoying their summer holidays. Amongst them is a happy young couple who are enjoying their honeymoon. But one of them won't return home from this vacation. The ship is full of young people looking to relax and enjoy themselves in paradise. It's a celebratory mood on the sea. But all that is about to change. George Smith IV is a typical mid-20s guy from New England. Well-built and athletic, George grew up in Connecticut to a well-off family. After obtaining a business degree from Babson College, George works different computer research jobs before moving home to help out at the family liquor store. A natural computer whiz, George is living alone near the family store while he updates the business's computer system and moves into online liquor sales. It's around this time that George rekindles his relationship with Jennifer Hoggle. George and Jennifer have known each other since college, but now that George is back in Connecticut, things are starting to heat up. It doesn't take long for Jennifer to move into George's apartment. Jennifer is gorgeous. Her platinum blonde good looks make her stand out in a crowd. From a neighboring town, Jennifer has her master's in education and teaches 3rd grade in Westport, Connecticut. George's parents are unsure about Jennifer. They're still getting to know her, and they question that she moved in too quickly.
George is a young man, comes from a fairly wealthy family. They're successful business owners. He met Jennifer within a short period of time. They fell in love.
In love and without a care in the world, the couple decides to take the plunge and tie the knot. The couple move quickly towards a wedding. The day after becoming Mr. and Mrs. George Smith, they are on a plane to Europe to board the cruise of a lifetime. The Smiths seem to have a picture-perfect romance, but this cruise is a floating party full of deadly distractions. Intending to gamble, George has brought a significant amount of cash with him. He has received some money from the wedding and intends to spend it. Unconcerned about any kind of theft, George doesn't hide his money. During the past few days, George has met other young travelers. One of them is Josh Askin, a 20-year-old California surfer. Josh is traveling with his family, but has made fast friends with another group of travelers. Josh introduces George to a group of hard-partying Russian Americans. 20-year-old Rusty Kaufman from Brooklyn is the leader of the group, also consisting of the 3 Rosenberg cousins. Young and carefree, the group of Russian Americans choose to ignore the pleas of the ship's crew. They continue smoking and disregard the employee for telling them to stop. George and Jennifer have spent an exciting day on the Greek island of Mykonos. But the warmth the couple feels at dinner fades quickly. Jennifer is upset with George. He's more excited to drink with his new friends than spend time with Jennifer. Jennifer chooses to gamble alone, making her way to the blackjack table. George tries to forget about it. He and Josh make their way to the bar to have a drink. George is not afraid to pull out his large billfold of cash. He's feeling generous and buys the whole group a round of drinks. He flaunts his cash without a care, but can he trust his new drinking buddies?
George knew that he was going to spend a lot of money on this cruise ship. He liked to gamble. He wasn't afraid for people to see that he had this large amount of money. Most of us would be a little more cautious about who knew that we were carrying such a large sum. He didn't seem to care.
The group is looking to continue their night in the ship's disco. George is joined by his new friends. At this point, Jennifer also reunites with the group. The group of young people pass around a bottle, taking turns pulling swigs of the liquor.
Not all alcohol is created equal. Some is a lot stronger than others. And in any case, when you're drinking, especially when you're drinking to excess, you should be around people you trust. When you have 2,300 people on a ship, that's basically a floating town. So obviously there's going to be some people who are stranger than others, some people you want to spend time with, and others you want to avoid. And then you have the alcohol factor, which can always make things interesting, not always in a good way.
Jennifer seems to be attracting attention from others. Still upset with George, she leaves the group. At the bar, she meets an off-duty ship employee, a croupier from the casino. Jennifer is flirting openly with the other men. George finally notices and is going to do something about it. Paying no attention to the stranger, he pulls Jennifer away. Not all things are perfect in the Smiths' new marriage, as tensions begin to show.
They were all drinking together, there was some dancing, and then all of a sudden there was an issue between Jennifer and George, and Jennifer ends up kicking George in the groin and storming off. And she had a pretty volatile personality.
George is on the floor wheezing for breath. Jennifer runs out of the disco, but George can't get to his feet in time to chase her.
and George ends up drinking more.
It's 3:30 a.m. and the disco is closing. George is very drunk. A big man, it takes all of his new friends to help him back to his cabin. George is surprised that his wife isn't asleep in their cabin. She left the disco earlier than he did, but is nowhere to be found. Where could she be? After a fruitless search for Jennifer around the ship, George is back at his cabin. Askin, Kaufman, and the Rosenbergs spend a few minutes in the room before they leave George alone. They are the last ones to see him alive. George Smith and his young and beautiful wife Jennifer are on the honeymoon cruise of a lifetime. The couple has been meeting other young people. They are the last ones to see George Smith alive. But what do they know about that night? Alcoholic drinks likely dull George's senses, and he is possibly unaware of the potential danger lurking around him. The bright morning sun brings the passengers to the deck. A couple arrives at the railing after being notified by their daughter of an unusual sight. They discover a large bloodstain on the ship's white canopy. They alert security to their grisly discovery.
Passengers were horrified to find a large quantity of blood staining the white canopy over the lifeboats just under George and Jennifer's cabin.
Cruise ships are notoriously clean. To have a large pattern of blood on such an obvious part of the ship is highly unusual.
Where are George and Jennifer? That's the question.
The ship's halls are like a labyrinth, full of dead ends. Jennifer can't find her room. Exhausted and lost, she decides to rest. It doesn't take long for security to find Jennifer. She is in a bleary haze from partying all night, but she is able to tell them her name and her room number.
Jennifer was found down the hall on the same floor where their room was, but down the hall in an opposite direction. It appeared as if she had sort of made a mistake and gone the wrong way and just laid down and went to sleep. I mean, I think she was, from what we can tell, pretty intoxicated.
Jennifer is unable to walk on her own. The security guards help her into a wheelchair and take her back to her cabin. And she is laid down to fall asleep. Jennifer and the guards are completely unaware that her husband is missing.
George is not in the room, obviously, when she gets dropped into the bed.
George had spent a night away from the cabin earlier in the cruise. When Jennifer wakes up and doesn't find George, she's not alarmed because this is not unusual for George.
At about 8 o'clock, 8:15, she gets up, doesn't see George there, but goes down to get a massage in the same clothes that she was in the night before. Sort of a weird situation there.
Jennifer has a massage appointment at 8:30 in the morning and does not want to be late. Meanwhile, the ship's captain is just starting his day when he gets the horrific news of the bloodstained canopy. Acting quickly, the crew determines that only Mr. and Mrs. George Smith are unaccounted for.
When you're not found immediately and people are concerned about you, they are often going to institute door-to-door searches on a cruise ship. They can tell whether you're on the boat or not because you've had to use your electronic swipe card to get on or off. So they have a log of every passenger and whether they're on the ship or not.
And then at about 10 o'clock, they start announcing that, basically George Smith is missing and they're trying to find her.
George isn't turned up anywhere, but they do find Jennifer and she's in the process of getting a massage.
And then they find her and they report to her that they think he's gone overboard. And then sort of all hell breaks loose,
Word spreads quickly through the grapevine, and the passengers are learning about George's disappearance. Information starts to come forward from different witnesses, but who's to say if any provide credible leads? One credible witness to come forward is Cleet Hyman, a veteran police officer in California. Mr. Hyman is the Smiths' next-door cabin neighbor and tells the ship's security about hearing noises from the Smiths' cabin. Could they have anything to do with George's disappearance?
Witnesses see things, hear things, and their reliability often is determined by what their life experience is in terms of what they think they saw or heard. In this particular case, we have a very credible witness in the form of a police officer who heard sounds that aroused his suspicions.
Josh Askin, who was with George until at least 4:15 a.m., approaches the ship's crew with his side of the story. Josh's efforts to help seem sincere, but does he know more than he's letting on? George's cabin neighbor, Cleet Hyman, claims he was woken up by loud noises coming from the Smith cabin. When he gets up to look into the hall, he sees 3 people leaving. Could Cleet be witnessing the aftermath of a murder, or simply a group of friends departing a late-night gathering? George Smith and his new wife, Jennifer, are on their honeymoon cruise around the Mediterranean. But there has been some trouble in paradise already. With Jennifer AWOL, a drunken George needs his new travel buddies to help him back to his cabin. But once George is alone, he'll never be seen again. George has been missing only a few hours. What could have happened to him? The ship is docked in Turkey, so local police are the first investigators on site.
In Turkey, an FBI agent was contacted who happened to be on vacation over in Turkey, and he went on board the ship and started to interview some people. The Turkish, CSI went on board, and they were the ones that did the investigation in the room and also were involved with sort of their forensics that were put together.
The Turkish police inspect the Smith cabin and photograph all the evidence they can find.
Generally, a cruise ship, when it's sailing in international waters, follows the laws of the flag that it's flying. In this particular case, the crime occurred off the coast of Turkey, so the Turkish authorities were given priority in terms of investigating this particular incident. Because it's an American citizen, the FBI would need to be notified and they would have an opportunity to conduct their own investigation.
I had heard from an FBI agent that they felt that the Turkish forensic investigation was actually pretty well done for the amount of time that they had.
But is there someone on board who can reveal the bigger picture? Jennifer is the first person police question. She claims to have no memory of what happened. Jennifer does not even remember the blow-up she had with George in the disco.
Interrogations are not what they're often portrayed to be. It's a matter of building rapport with the person across the table from you, treating them with respect and treating them like a person, trying to get to know them. Those little details will help them trust you and provide you the information you want.
With nothing linking her to the disappearance, a grieving Jennifer is allowed to go. Josh Askin has come forward to tell his side of the story. What does he know about George's disappearance? Josh fills in the picture of the previous night. Slowly, the details about a drunken night come forward. Josh fills the police in on the croupier he thinks was flirting with Jennifer throughout the night. Not willing to hide anything, Josh also details how drunk everyone was, singling out George specifically. When the disco closed, it was clear George couldn't walk. Josh claims that along with Kaufman and two of the Rosenberg cousins, he helped a drunken George back to his stateroom. Everything seems normal. According to Josh, he never saw any money in the room, or that the Rosenbergs tried to look through George's cabin. When Josh left the cabin, George was alone. He was quite drunk, but very much alive. With Josh's side of the story, a fuller portrait is developing of what actually happened in those early morning hours when George Smith disappeared. Cleet Hyman is the next witness to be brought in. He is a veteran law enforcement officer in California and George's neighbor on the cruise. Cleet couldn't see what happened, but could hear it all through the thin walls. He is a credible witness with information that could change the case.
So in this particular case, we have a witness, Cleet, a police officer from California, who heard suspicious sounds coming from the cabin next door. That in and of itself sets a time for us to work around in terms of an investigation.
Cleet has heard this before. During a previous night in the cruise, he was woken up by partying next door. He's angry, but not surprised that the noise is back. But something is different about tonight.
They heard a commotion, heard fighting, heard things being thrown around, and sounded like things being broken in the room, which really indicated to us that there was some sort of struggle or fight.
At about 4:25 a.m., Cleet hears a tremendous thud coming from outside his window. He doesn't get up to look, but could this have been George's body falling over the balcony? Cleet heard a lot of things that early morning. He certainly has more to tell about the disappearance of George Smith. Despite being named by Josh Askin, Rusty Kaufman and his friends, the Rosenberg cousins, have not yet been questioned by the police. Do they have any helpful information that investigators don't know about? The investigators and the captain determined the ship traveled over 200 miles in the night, a vast area that's difficult to search. Turkish authorities have done all they can and leave the ship to give the crew permission to hose the blood off the canopy.
The problem was that it happened so quickly that the FBI itself couldn't preserve the evidence before the ship moved on and the blood was washed off the canopy.
This canopy covered in blood has a huge amount of forensic evidence on it. To simply wash it and leave it in place does nothing for the investigation whatsoever. We would typically take that canopy and store it for further investigation down the road.
The captain quickly files an internal report calling the death accidental. But what really happened that night? Could the entire evening be a series of unfortunate accidents? George and Jennifer were both drinking heavily from a bottle of absinthe smuggled aboard. Jennifer leaves the group early. and in her drunken state, can't find her way. George Smith liked to smoke a cigar on vacation. Is it possible that the noise Clete Hyman heard was only George's careless search for a cigar? And could George's disappearance be explained by an accidental fall while smoking a cigar? George Smith and his new wife are enjoying a romantic cruise around the Mediterranean. It's an idyllic honeymoon cruise until George mysteriously disappears. Jennifer tells local police her version of the previous night, and they don't suspect her. With the ship's security backing up her alibi and the time frame matching Clete Hyman's story, there's no reason to believe she was involved in George's disappearance.
So at this particular point, all we have is blood on a canopy that's now been washed away. We don't have any witness accounts detailing what actually happened to the missing person. All we have is the fact that they're no longer here. Do they want to not be found? Did they harm themselves, or were they the subject of foul play? There's no way to know without actually having the body to examine.
Jennifer is no longer a suspect and is cleared by police to leave. Instead of finishing the cruise alone, Jennifer makes the obvious choice and disembarks in Turkey to fly home. As the cruise sails on, the group of young Russian-American men remains on board.
Turns out that George maybe didn't pick the best group of people to hang out with. They got to be so rowdy, they actually got kicked off the ship after George went missing.
There were a couple instances prior to George's disappearance where they had run-ins with the security detail, and then ultimately they were all thrown off of the ship, I believe in Italy, because a couple of them had been accused of basically a gang rape of a young lady that had been on the ship. But the fact of the matter is that they put both families and the Russian men off the ship.
Clete Hyman is the most reliable witness to George's disappearance. He may not have seen what happened, but he heard it all through the thin walls of the cruise ship cabins. Clete is initially awoken by what sounded like a drinking game coming from the Smith's cabin next door. This is not the first time this has happened on the cruise. Clete complains about the noise, and the operator assures him they will send someone to check on the noise complaint. After he bangs on the wall, Clete remembers about 5 minutes of loud talking. There is a possibility someone leaves in this time, but he can't be sure. As Clete is drifting in and out of sleep, he hears the conversation move to the balcony. Tensions heat up, and it turns into an argument between 3 voices. The argument subsides, and the sounds move toward the door. Clete can hear the words, "Good night," said repeatedly, followed by the door closing. Clete clearly sees 3 men coming from the direction of the Smith's cabin at about 4:15 a.m. But is anyone else still in the room with George?
When he heard the commotion end, then he heard the door open and he heard some people leaving. He actually looked down the hall and saw 3 men walking down the hall. What was important about that fact was that 4 of them went into the room and only 3 came out.
Despite the visitors leaving, Clete continues to hear noises coming from next door. It appears someone is searching through the cupboards and drawers. It seems that the worst is over, so Cleet tries to fall back to sleep. He hears the balcony chair move, but then several minutes of silence. After a short lull, there is a tremendous thud that shakes Cleet's cabin. Could it have been someone falling off the balcony? It's only been a few minutes since the entire ordeal Cleet Hyman heard through the thin wall. 2 security guards helped Jennifer, who is passed out in the hall. The security have helped a drunken Jennifer to her cabin and leave her to sleep it off. If they had only been a few minutes earlier, would the outcome have been different? Cleet tells the security guards about his noise complaint. The guards dismiss his concerns because they were just in the cabin, and Cleet is satisfied. There are no visual witnesses to George's disappearance. But the last people to see George alive that night may have more insight. Before being kicked off the boat by the ship's crew, Rusty Kaufman and his friends, the Rosenberg cousins, are finally questioned by police, but they do it in an unorthodox manner. The police questioned the group all together at the same time. Could they have changed their stories to fit a single narrative? What could police have learned from questioning them separately?
One of the best ways in an investigation to find out if people are telling the truth is to get them to tell their stories separately, so no one has a chance to corroborate each other or get their story straight, so to speak. One of the big mistakes that was made in this case is the suspects were interviewed together in the same room, so they could easily corroborate each other or back up each other's stories.
We have a group of witnesses who are all interviewed simultaneously. And that gives them the opportunity to feed off each other while they're telling the story and confirm with each other whether what they're saying is accurate or not, as far as they want the investigators to know. Investigators typically want to interview people separately, and that way we can get the details from each person and see whether they corroborate each other's story to gain an idea of whether they're being truthful.
What else could have happened the night George disappeared? George is drunk and visibly showing off his money, and he's very trusting of his new friends. The group of young men are full of testosterone and surrounded by beautiful women, including Jennifer Smith. Hoping to find Jennifer in the cabin, Kaufman may be disappointed when George's bride is nowhere to be found. Perhaps, knowing that George had a lot of money on him, they may search the cabin for anything of value. And perhaps find the cash George has hidden. Was the pull of the money too strong? Could bloodlust and drunken anger overpower any rational emotion? Was George Smith pushed to his death? Is it all just a terrible accident, or is there still more to be uncovered? Jennifer Smith's world has been turned upside down. She is on her honeymoon cruise with her new husband, George, when he vanishes into thin air. With Jennifer drunk and sleeping in the hallway far from her and George's room, the best witness is cabin neighbor Clete Heyman. He hears a struggle through the thin walls and sees 3 people leave the cabin. The last people to see George alive are friends he made in the ship's nightclub just days earlier. Josh Askin and the Rosenberg cousins claim that after partying with George, they help him to his room. He is alive and well when they leave him there. It has been several days since George went missing, and no one is apprehended. The cruise is continuing, but the FBI have already contacted the ship's captain about George's case. The lawyer representing the Smith family finally has the opportunity to take the deposition of Josh Askin and the Rosenbergs. The results are not what he expected.
The interesting thing was that for the most part, particularly with Askin invoked his right against self-incrimination under the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution on every single question that I asked him.
Well, in the U.S. Constitution, the Fifth Amendment gives a person the right to not incriminate themselves. They don't have to say anything that will provide evidence that they've committed a crime. We frequently hear about the Miranda rights when somebody is told they have the right to remain silent. Miranda is simply a case in U.S. law based on the Fifth Amendment where somebody was not appropriately advised of the fact that they didn't have to say anything to the police.
And then with the 3 Russians, with Rusty Kaufman and the 2 Rosenbergs, they did the same thing to more or less to a certain extent. And that really raised some eyebrows because they had maintained all along that they were innocent, they hadn't done anything wrong, they put George to bed and they went back to their rooms. Well, if that's the case, why were they invoking the Fifth? The Russian men and Josh Askin, their claim was that when they had put George to bed, at least the Russians went back to their room, one of their rooms, and ordered copious amounts of food and room service. And that was somehow their alibi that, hey, we were back in the room, look at all the room service that we ordered. We couldn't have done anything to George because we were chowing down back in our room.
Michael and his team continue uncovering new information.
Not only was the room service not delivered, but we found out that one of the 2 rooms that the Russians were staying in had actually been cut off of room service because of some vulgar language and misbehavior by a couple of the Russian men earlier in the cruise, where they would call up at night looking for room service and be very abusive toward the staff. And finally, one of the security officers said, you know what, just cut them off. So that was sort of eye-opening because here was this alibi that they had, and the alibi was just flushed down the toilet.
George's parents reach a settlement with Jennifer and the cruise line, ultimately granting them access to the cruise line's internal investigation.
And then we basically turned over everything that we got to the FBI, and that started this sort of long saga of me hounding the FBI and the Justice Department to try to get them to look into this case and really work it. And the problem was that we ran into a lot of roadblocks.
Years later, the case has still not significantly progressed, leaving both Jennifer and George's parents wondering what happened that night. Jennifer still claims she has no memory of what happened those last hours before George went missing. Could her blackout have been that severe? Will any memories resurface? Attorney Michael Jones has never given up on the case and is doggedly trying to get law enforcement to look into the case again.
The case sits in boxes somewhere in the District of Connecticut with no one looking at it, and technically they claim that technically all cases are still open, but it's basically closed. There's no one really working on it, and there's nothing new, and it just sits there.
George Smith's disappearance on his honeymoon cruise with his new wife Jennifer has caused his parents to look for answers. Besides the FBI and the Turkish police, the cruise line conducts its own investigation.
And they had a pretty significant amount of information that they had accumulated. Really what the family wanted to do was to get access to the investigation.
But even with access to the cruise line's inquiry, too many possibilities remain. With so many unanswered questions to what happened the night George disappeared, there is also still the possibility the Smiths were the target of a robbery on the high seas, although no money was ever confirmed missing. Michael Jones is still working on the case of George Smith. He's determined to find some kind of answer for the family.
They're good people, and it's sad. It's sad what they've been put through. It's sad that they never got justice for George. And the sad part too is that there were so many ups and downs in this case. I mean, right now it's a cold case. If anything happens, it'll be treated as a cold case, and that's going to be, when we go back to the FBI, that'll be the pitch that, maybe you could assign this to the cold case division.
George's family has never given up fighting for answers in his disappearance. They want the world to remember him as a kind and bright young man. The family has even testified in front of Congress on George's behalf in an inquiry into cruise ship safety.
And there's more to it. There's more evidence that we can't even really talk about at this point, which makes it even worse that this case hasn't been resolved. But the problem is that publicly we can't talk about it, because if it ever does get prosecuted, to let some of the information out now could ruin the prosecution.
George's body has never been found.
What a tragic, horrible thing to happen. Someone's honeymoon should be the most wonderful time in their life, and in this case, the husband ends up missing, and we still don't know what happened to him. There's no suspects, there's no active movement on this case, so as of now, it's gone cold, and there are no answers. But hopefully one day, we'll find out what happened to George.
The Smiths have offered a $100,000 reward for any information in connection to George Allen Smith IV's disappearance.